All right, Stephen, we had a story we wanted to take a closer look at, and it's one that kind of hits on both of our topic areas. And it's kind of interesting because there was an excellent article that was published by a man named Karim Khan, and he is currently a prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. And he has started to make the case that cybercriminals should be subject to international law for the escapades. The current state of the world often sees a lot of these cyber criminals go unpunished because they're either backed by nation states or there's just a plain old lack of jurisdiction. Khan says that we need to really get tougher by ensuring that these ne'er-do-wells can face justice for their crimes, especially considering the fact that they've impacted so many people around the world and they've started to hit softer targets. They're not just attacking shipping companies or other places like that. They're starting to go after places like hospitals. And I know that we both have pretty strong opinions about this, but I wanted to kind of start off this discussion first by asking, we've seen a lot of the cyber criminals that are starting these gangs. They're basically headquartered in less friendly countries to the West, and they seem to basically get away with impunity. Do you think that Karim Khan can actually get things changed so that these criminals can be extradited to the International Criminal Court to face justice?
Well, I think that this is right. And I would say that this really kind of went under the radar. I really appreciate some of the folks in the community who pointed out this article to me. And because in reading it, honestly, I wouldn't have even noticed this until somebody else put it in context. So let's do that. As you said, that this is a prosecutor for the International Criminal Court. These are the people who prosecute war crimes. And one of the things that he says in the article, I'm actually going to read it here because I think it's the key thing to understand about what he's trying to say. He says there's an emerging consensus among states that cyberspace is not a special domain free from regulation, but rather that international law has a clear role to play. That's the summary of this whole argument. He's not saying that we need a new law about cyberspace. He's not saying that we need some kind of international treaty that says cyberspace is or is not a place where we should be looking for war crimes and human rights abuses. He's saying that cyberspace is not a special place. Cyberspace is just another field in which people can commit human rights violations and war crimes. And to have a prosecutor say this, what he's clearly indicating is I'm going after people who commit war crimes in cyberspace, just like I would people who commit those crimes in physical domains. And I feel like that right there is getting us where we need to go as a society. Because if you look at what has happened, now, admittedly, the cyber crimes that have happened in, for example, Ukraine or in the West with international, conflict, or frankly, in countries in that the West is attacking. Many of those things have gone unnoticed or unobserved, but I think that we could make a case that some of those were crimes against human rights in the strictest sense. If you're attacking a hospital and taking down their ability to help heal patients, that's a crime according to the International Criminal Court, and you should be prosecuted for that. Just because you did it behind a keyboard instead of at a missile battery doesn't change that. So on that point, I think that maybe, I don't want to say we can all agree, but I think that many of us can agree that cyberspace, like he says here, is not a special place and that the crimes committed there should be prosecuted by the International Court. Now, Tom, if we take that as a given, where does this go next?
Well, I think where it goes next is we're going to have to kind of rearrange the law that we have to help be more specific about these problems. In the article, he mentions that the International Red Cross has already put out statements talking about how just because something is, like a power plant attached to the internet doesn't mean you should treat it like a computer system. You should treat it like what it is. And the International Red Cross, the Geneva Conventions Against Warfare exist for a reason, because we don't make war on civilian populations. That's just wrong. I think almost all of us would agree that wiping out a hospital or breaching a dam and causing a flood that destroys thousands of acres and kills thousands of people is bad. But it's hard to put those two things together when in the old days we literally had to wire the dam, and today all I have to do is punch a few keystrokes and all of a sudden some things on a board change and you don't see that impact. And I think that it's going to take organizations like, Amnesty International and the International Red Cross to help people understand the importance of that. And I go back to the Stuxnet hack. It's one of the most famous hacks that was pulled off by intelligence agencies, but it was very specifically targeted in such a way as to not cause collateral damage. They didn't blow up a nuclear power plant. They wrecked the equipment inside of it so that it couldn't operate, and did it in a way that would take the plant completely offline. And that was essentially the morality of an intelligence service going, I don't want to cause a disaster. But some people are not that good. Some people are not that moral or ethical or empathetic. And could you imagine what would happen if we wanted to knock out power to a country that we were about to invade? So we literally caused a nuclear disaster to get there. 2-for-1, baby. I'd knock out the power and I deny that area to people. And that kind of thinking is what's going to lead us down this slippery slope. How long will it be before a country just literally has all of its hospitals shut down so that they can't care for wounded troops? And if you are all connected to the internet, which we are now, that's a huge problem. And we've seen this uptick in the way that cyber warfare is being conducted. And just like we would run into a situation where enemy intelligence agents or spies put on civilian clothes and try to blend into the population, we have non-military actors that are trying to carry out operations on behalf of the military and then claim innocence because I'm not a combatant. And I think that that's going to get into a very, very deep gray area, which is why we have to go back and we have to redefine what this means. I know that you and I have taken a look at the U.S. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act on a number of occasions and kind of, turned up our noses to it because it was written in a time when war games was the most advanced computer system that we had ever seen. But we still have to have laws. And for all of the crypto bros out there that are watching this say, oh, cyberspace is a different place and, it's not subject to the laws of man, you still have to interact with daily society. We are not to the point where it's like the lawnmower man and you can upload your consciousness into cyberspace and live there forever. We still have to have reality grounded with everything that we do. And reality is governed by laws written by people to make sure that we as a society behave in a way that comports for ourselves to grow. And if that means that we have to say to all the countries of the world, it's time for us to grow up and act like adults and start prosecuting the people who are doing these things, not for the lulls, not for the money, but for the chaos, then I think that's what we need to do.
And I would say that it's important to keep in mind, though, that the International Criminal Court has been somewhat controversial among nations. And it's important to realize that when it comes to cybercrime, most of the countries that are most guilty of cyber attacks against each other are not signatories to the International Criminal Court or members. So Israel, the United States, and Russia all signed on, but then withdrew their signature over, in between 2002 and 2016. India and China never were signatories or members and have not become part of this. Again, I'm not trying to throw shade on any of those countries in particular, but I will say that if you were to make a list of who you're going to worry about when it comes to cyber warfare, I think that those would be some of the countries that would be on your list. And none of them are allowing themselves to be subject to this. But that being said, I think that this sends a message. So to have the prosecutor, again, he's not just a prosecutor, he's the prosecutor, say, I'm going to go after these crimes in the International Criminal Court, it sends a message to countries, even countries that are not signatories, that we shouldn't consider cyberspace to be something that is not subject to international law and human rights considerations. And I hope that that would send a message to countries, even those countries that are not signatories, that they ought to maybe start paying attention to international law and not endanger everybody. Because, as we've seen in story after story here on the rundown, it is very easy to cause havoc with a cyber attack. Malware, social engineering, viruses and worms and bots, they can cause incredible damage. In many cases, more damage than somebody pulling the trigger of a gun or setting off a bomb or launching an artillery round. And we need to have some way of controlling that.